Welcome back to the Talking Archive. This is Josh Jacobs. We're continuing our conversation with radio personality and voiceover artist Jeff Davis and his time at one of the most legendary oldies stations in Southern California, actually the most legendary oldies station in Southern California. By the way, I got a question. When you worked at KRF 101, were you full-time on the air or doing production or a combination of both?
I was doing production and occasionally originally I was doing a weekend air shift, and I went into Phil Hall and I said, look, I work my butt off during the week. I want a 5-day work week. Can we arrange that? And he said, yeah. So I ended up working 5 days a week in production.
Mm-hmm.
I created some pretty good stuff there. I was very proud of the work that I did at KRF. And then, I'd worked originally, when I came out here, I went to work at KNX-FM, which later became KODJ.
That's right, yeah.
And, I didn't like it there. Kurt Kelly was not the easiest person to work for. I think he was going through some problems at that time. And I don't know what's going on with him now. I've not seen or heard from him in quite a long time. But Kurt and Charlie Seraphin, who's the general manager, they promised me several things, and none of them came about.
Mm-hmm.
And Kurt started making demands, plus the fact that Kurt had put me on the air in middays, which I wasn't hired for. I was hired to be the production director, and I really didn't like the fact that, A, I didn't get the office they promised me, B, I didn't have a contract, and C, I was being asked to do middays, and that wasn't why I was hired. And Denise Westwood, do you remember her?
Sounds familiar.
She worked late at night, and Denise, who's calling? Nothing. It's a junk call. Denise had called me at home, and she said that Kurt was down in Dallas and left a note, had her dictate a note which said that I'd better have the Breakfast with the Beatles promo on the air by 10 a.m. tomorrow or else. Well, I don't intimidate.
Mm-hmm.
And I thanked her for letting me know that the note was in my box. And see, the problem was I was on the air from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
When I got off the air, I would start doing my production. Well, the production had to be cleared by CBS Legal.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I got off the air, it was already 5 o'clock in New York, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't clear the promo, but I did produce the promo. It was ready to go the next morning. I'd come in at 10 a.m., or actually, I think 9:30, because I'd be on the air at 10. I'd come in at 9:30 and call CBS Legal, CBS Legal, get it approved and get it on the air. That was what I had to do. But for him to threaten me like that, it pissed me off. And I've never been without a job. I've never been unemployed.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I got fired at Weem, I still had a job. I walked out of that station and into the next one. But the thing is, I knew the note was there, and I got in the next morning, and I looked at the note, and I walked into Seraphin's office right past the secretary and threw open Seraphin's door and holding that note by the tip of my fingers, and I said, "What the F is this?" And the look on Seraphin's face was priceless, and he looked at it and he said, "I don't know what this is about." And I said, "Well, I don't intimidate, just so you know. I'm going back to the production room, going to the air. Actually, I was going to do my show." So I got off the air, and Charlie said, "I talked to Kurt, and Kurt said he didn't dictate this." And I said, "I know damn well he did." And I said, "You can tell him for me that I don't intimidate, and his damn promo is on the air." I said, "But he better cut the crap." So I don't know what was going through Kurt's problem, what was happening with Kurt at the time. So I called Phil Hall over at K-Earth, and Phil had called me in Chicago after I'd taken the job at KNX, and he said, if things don't work out, I'll hold a job open for you at K-Earth. Well, this is 4 or 5 months later, and I called Phil up, and I said, did you mean what you said when you called me in Chicago? And he said, I sure as hell did. And I said, well, I think I want to jump ship here. And he said, well, let's have lunch. So we had lunch the next day, and he offered me a job as the production director of the station, which was what I had gotten the job to do originally at KNX-FM. And I turned in my resignation, knowing that they were getting ready to change to KODJ. In fact, I designed their artwork for them.
I love that artwork. That was such cool-looking artwork. Yeah. And then when they switched it to CBS-FM, they just had the corporate logo. It made it look like it was an FM news station rather than an oldies station.
Yeah, I did a lot of artwork for KNX, and they took my basic idea, and I don't know how much of it they used or even care.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I wouldn't tell them where I was going to work, and I wouldn't tell Phil anything that KODJ was going to do because they had not changed format yet. I don't operate like that. It's professional courtesy. You don't talk about people's secrets.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Phil said, if you had told me, I wouldn't have hired you. And I said, well, whatever. I'm not going to tell anybody anybody's secrets. And so anyway, Charlie had guards to come escort me out of the building. And I'm walking down with Kurt, and Kurt said, Charlie's talking about suing you. And I said, you know what? Tell him to try it. There's nothing he can sue me for because the contract he promised me was never signed. Well, it's on his desk. And I said, what good does that do me? They escorted me out of the building. Segue to 3 years, about 3 years later,
mm-hmm.
3 or 4 years later, and I was at Star 98.7, and Kurt calls me up, and he says, hey, man, can I bring my tape, and can you walk it into the program director? And I said, sure, Kurt, I'd be happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Kurt was messed up. I think he was just really messed up. So, but he brought me a tape, and I brought it into the PD. I think it was Duncan was the PD at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, this is a tape from a friend of mine that I worked with over at KNX-FM. Maybe you can take a listen to it and see if it's something you'd be interested in. And he looked at it, he said, oh, Kurt Kelly, isn't he a problem? I said, he's okay. I said, he's going through a rough time. I said, but he's all right. So, one morning, it's 5:30 or whatever time it is, and the phone rings, and it's Bob Griffith or whoever, I can't remember who it was at the time, called and said that Kurt Kelly had called the morning show and was threatening to sue you and the radio station for some blocking his ability to work or something like that. And I said, these lawsuits, man, he can go for it. I don't care. I tried to help the guy. I've not tried to hurt him at all. So he threatened, and Griffith was really pissed about it. And I said, he's not going to do shit, believe me. He's just talking out of his ass. So around Christmas time, I went over, I was still married then, around Christmas time, I went over to Robinson's. I think later it became Robinson's May or something
mm-hmm.
like that. And I was in the jewelry department. I was looking. I remember the ring that I bought for my wife at that time. It was this gorgeous yellow sapphire. Now, I didn't realize that sapphires came in yellow.
Wow, I didn't either.
Well, gorgeous ring. And And Kurt showed up. Kurt was there, and I said, "Hey, Kurt." He was so cold, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm okay." And I said, "Look, I'm going to tell you right now, I have always been your friend. I have always tried to help you." "I'm not so sure about that." And I said, "Hey, I have always tried to help you whenever I could." And I said, if you didn't get a job, it wasn't because I didn't try, because I did. And even when they hired Craig, I told them not to hire him for a radio show, hire him as the music director, because Craig is brilliant when it comes to music.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that Craig would not want to do the morning show. It was totally out of his element. And that turned into a bit of a disaster.
Mm.
But, it just, I also got Craig the job at K-Earth, for that matter.
Wow.
I helped him both times, but Craig has always been like a brother to me. But, it's just that you realize that some things are puzzle pieces that don't fit. You know how they're supposed to fit, but management doesn't. They come up with a different idea than what your idea is, and sometimes their ideas just don't work.
Well, Star 9.7, I used to listen to it, but it was always confusing to me. They said superstars of the 80s and 90s, but I rarely heard Duran Duran. They only played 90s Michael Jackson. I didn't hear the Cars or Culture Club or the Eurythmics. It was kind of strange, it was a really weird. And finally, I think around, 1995, when they kind of switched to light alternative / modern AC was when they but even then they were limited on their 80s music. It was just like, dude, it's like, I don't know.
Well, it was really an interesting thing because Star was trying to be what Kurt Kelly wanted originally for KNX-FM before they decided to go oldies.
Mm.
He wanted to do adult alternative.
Oh.
And, people like, people that were kind of marginally top 40,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they really were trying to walk the line between those two formats. And I had originally gone in, Star was originally KXEZ. And the PD at the time called me at home, and he wanted me to. He said, "I'd like to meet you for lunch." And I said, "Okay." Jeff Davis Productions was in full swing, and so I went down there and talked with him. And I'm sitting in his office, and I said, KXEZ is music for dead people. I said, "Why don't you format to hot AC?" I said, "There's no good hot AC station in town. You got to change it to hot AC." And the look on his face was like I had drained the blood out of his face. And he said, "Oh, no, Viacom would never do that." He said, "But I'd love to hear how you sound on the air on KXEZ." I said, "It'll be a train wreck." And he said, No, really. If we have a situation where someone has to take some time off or is ill or whatever, would you be agreeable to come in and do an air shift?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So that I think it was about a week or two. He called me, or actually, God, what was his first name? Gonzalez was his last name.
Mm.
But he had called me and said, "Hey, Bill Gonzalez," he said, "We need you to come in and do a show on Sunday. I understand that you said you'd be willing to do that." And I said, "I will, but I don't do that kind of radio." I said, "But I think I can zone down." He said, No, he wants you to do what you did at WLS. And I said, "Are you kidding?" I said, "That's going to sound terrible. Going into Johnny Mathis or Barbra Streisand with the WLS style delivery." So I tried to cut the difference because I knew it was going to sound like crap.
Mm-hmm.
And about midway through the show, I got a call from the program director, and he said, "You sound really great." And I said, That's what you think. And, so anyway, I did the show and went home. Told my wife at the time, I said, boy, that just sucked. And so she said, well, it had to be fun. You haven't done radio in a little while. And I said, yeah, it was all right. But about a week or two went by, and I got a call from, who the hell was the PD at the time? He was the operations manager. I'm having trouble remembering the name now.
Randy, or was it? Well, there was Greg Duncan, and then there was a guy named.
Well, Greg was the PD later.
Okay.
Greg and I got along really well. I thought he was a bit of a dumbass, but I got along really well with Greg. Greg and I sometimes would take long walks and just chit chat.
Was he the one who put Man for Man's Earth Band "Blinded by the Light" on Star? Because, wait a minute, that's not 80s or 90s.
Yeah, it's weird. But there were a lot of mismatches like that. But anyway, he calls me at home, and somebody calls him from the office, and he wants to meet with me. And I told my wife, I said, I think that they just want to be kind to me, let me down easy, that it was a fun experiment, that I did this radio show on Sunday, and that was it. So I go to the radio station just as a courtesy. I really didn't have the time, but I did it. And sat in his office, and he said, we're launching, he made me sign a paper, I think, a non-disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
And he closed his door, and he said, this Friday, we're launching Star 98.7, and we want you to be the who launches it.
Wow.
I already told you I'm not interested. I've got my company, and I said I'm not interested. And he said, and he gave me a number. I can't remember how much. It might have been 50,000 or whatever. And I said, nope, thanks, but no thanks. I said I just really don't want to do a radio show right now. I've got my company I'm building and all that stuff. And he goes down the hall, and he comes back, and they had a bigger number, 65, 70,000, whatever it was. And he said, we'll give you a 3-year deal. And I said, I'll only do this if you agree not to interfere with my business. I said, because I've invested a lot of my time. I built my list where I'm self-sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to do it if it interferes with my company. And he said, no, we'll do it. We'll do it. And I said, all right, I'll be here Friday and we'll do this thing. So go on Friday, and they had their salespeople at different parties around L.A., listening party type things to announce the new radio station. And I go on the air, and the production sucked. It was the liners they did was from a company in Seattle, and I did not like it at all. It sounded really dull.
I remember there was a voice. I don't know if this is the imaging you're talking about, but it was a voiceover artist that sounded very familiar that I heard on commercials. One of the, forgive me my impersonation, maybe I can do this or not. You're in the middle of another star sweep. His voice sounded like that. Is that the production you're talking about, or maybe it was something else?
Do you remember this radio personality who called herself the Slim One?
No.
Slim Nelson. That was
Slim
her
Nelson?
name.
Oh, okay.
She was married to him, and they were up in Seattle, and I cannot remember the name of the company, but I don't think he knew much about how to produce that kind of stuff. So, I go on the air, and I'm doing this stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, God Almighty, this really sounds bad. Music was okay. It was fun. I enjoyed it. And then I decided to take all that production. I got the tapes and brought them home, and where I could remix them, I remixed them, and I added compression, a little slight amount of reverb, brought them back to the radio station and got them on the air, and people were talking about how fantastic they sounded. I said, yeah, because it's got processing on it now, and, got that on the air, and and then went my merry way. And then after a few years of doing that, I was going to have to sign another contract. And there was a guy they wanted to hire out of Phoenix, and to do the morning show.
Mm-hmm.
And
was it Jim and Melissa Sharp that they were doing that?
they were already there. Jim and Melissa were already there.
Oh, okay.
And I really like both of them. They got divorced eventually, and I think they may be in Phoenix now themselves. Maybe Tucson. I can't remember.
Because remember, Melissa was eventually engaged to Mitch Lewis, who had produced Robert W. Morgan's show, although I don't think they ever did get married. And Mitch died last year.
Wow.
He wasn't that old. I remember working with him at Music of Your Life Radio Network. I was shocked when I found that out.
Yeah.
And he was a workhorse. I mean, he just worked quite a bit. I mean, he says, "Yeah, I've probably been up at the last 24 hours." I'm like, 24 hours, dude, man.
Well, they were nice enough people, but I didn't care for their act.
Mm-hmm.
They had, for one thing, they had Tori Signal on, and that was a fake name. They had her doing traffic, and it was just a cackle fest. And I told Greg, I said, one of the great aspects of a good morning show is that when you've got a differentiation in terms of attitude. I said, usually the guy is going to say stupid stuff, and the woman is going to call him out on it. I said, they shouldn't all be laughing at everything he says. And I said, I find it irritating because, Tori's there, and she so wanted to have a central role in the station, and she had a bit of an ego. Nice girl, but I think that her ego was a little bit too hard, and I think she really wanted to be a part of the morning show. And to her credit, I probably would have been the same way if I'd been her.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the balance was wrong. And but anyway, they wanted to hire this guy to do the mornings, and he was hemming and hawing, and he said, "I don't want to do mornings. I don't want to do mornings." And they said, "Well, mornings are what we got. We really want you to be on the staff." So I went into Greg, and I said, "Greg, let him do afternoons." He said, "But that's your shift." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Chances are I'm not going to sign a new contract. So give me a good going-away party and put him on in the afternoons." And so they did hire him, and they brought him in the afternoons, and I think they may have put Craig on in the mornings. I can't remember. Craig hated the mornings, I just can't remember. That was so jumbled at that time. But they gave me a nice little going-away party, and that was it. And then I was out of it until about 1999 when I got a call from Steve Street over at K-Big 104, and another case where I didn't want to do it.
And we'll find out whether Jeff's intuition was correct. This is the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and next time we'll conclude our conversation with Jeff Davis about K-Big 104 as well as his voiceover career.